mother-in-law tried to turn my own child against me with lies and stalking, so I went nuclear and watched her get what she deserved. A year later, she came begging to be in our lives, but I was done playing nice. The second my baby girl popped out of my kitty cat, I was extremely scared of my husband, because it was obvious that he'd go to any lengths to protect her. "Please don't go near Isadora," he said to one of the nurses that looked slightly unkempt. His tone wasn't rude, just assertive and stern. The first few months of Isadora's life were hard, but my husband, unlike some of the other Reddit stories on here, made things easier. He cooked me anything I craved, in exactly the way I liked it. And whenever I started crying for no reason, or felt that postpartum gray blanket of sadness blinding me from seeing anything good in my life, he would be patient with me. Didn't force me to act happy. Just held my hand and kissed my forehead until the wave of sadness finally passed. And for those who don't know, babies usually experience their first smile at 6 weeks. But Isadora was so happy in the home we built that she smiled at just 4 weeks old. Her joy filled the entire house with so much happiness it was like you could feel it in your hands. Until she turned 4, me and my husband made sure to closely vet anyone who entered our home or came into contact with Isadora, family or otherwise. And on her 4th birthday, we allowed her to more freely socialize with others. After all, it was just a few months before her first day of school, so we figured it would also be good practice for the future. So we invited my sister, my brother-in-law, my mother-in-law, and all their kids. It ended up being around 15 people, and Isadora was practically being showered in gifts all day. We were at around the 5-hour mark when my back started to ache. I didn't want to ruin the mood, so I just put my hands on the small of my back and staggered over to the nearest wooden chair. But my husband instantly noticed and insisted on helping me lie down in bed. We would only be gone for 5 minutes, and since Isadora was surrounded by what we thought was trusted family, we figured everything would be okay. But it wasn't. Because while my husband tucked me into bed, we heard it. The sound no parent ever wants to hear. Their young child pleading for help. My husband instantly clenched his fists and sprinted down to the living room to see what was going on. I knew he was angry because he was using the tone he only used when he was trying his hardest not to shout in front of the kids. But I could hear the rage. I later found out that he had found marks left on Isadora's wrists. "Who effing did this?" my husband asked, his voice cold. The entire house was so silent I could practically hear the walls breathing. "Daddy, don't be mad. She didn't mean it," Isadora said. Her voice was so innocent it made me tear up. "Honey, you need to tell me who did it so that I can keep you safe." There was a long pause, and I guess she ended up pointing at my mother-in-law, because that's when my husband told Isadora to come upstairs to me, before kicking everyone else out of the house. "She spilled juice on my shirt!" I heard my mother-in-law scream, as if it was the most justified reason in the entire world. "Just count yourself lucky that you're a woman, because that's the only thing preventing me from turning your skull into sidewalk paint." Again, the entire house was silent. Isadora looked up at me with her big brown eyes filled with fear. I reassured her that everything was okay, and none of it was her fault. That adults are always responsible for protecting children, and if they ever do anything to hurt a child, they must be punished. She nodded and hugged me super tight. My mother-in-law was her first introduction to the world being unsafe, and in that moment I knew that I could never forgive her. And I guess my husband was thinking the same thing, because that's when he said the words, "You will never ever step within 5 miles of this house, and you will never know Isadora. Get the F out of my home." But, get out. My wonderful husband ruined any chance of her arguing with him, and soon I heard the front door slam shut. He then ran upstairs and we all sandwich cuddled for a while. I thought that was that. Spoiler alert, it very much wasn't. Because the next day, when Isadora came home from school, her face was completely swollen and red from crying. I called my husband to come, so we could tackle whatever was burdening her as a family. "I hate you!" she yelled, while pointing at my husband. We had no idea what was going on, and that's when she said, "You hurt Mommy, you're the worst," before grabbing my hand and trying to pull me out of the front door, away from him. I crouched down to her height, held her hands, and did the regulation breathing exercises we had practiced together. Once she had stopped hyperventilating, she told us what was really going on. My other mommy told me Daddy was kissing another woman. I watched as the color drained from my husband's face. You see, other mommy is what Isadora called her mother-in-law, and she had just convinced her that my husband was cheating on me. My husband completely lost his cool. I'd never seen him this angry before. He grabbed his phone and started pacing around the living room. I took Isadora to the kitchen for some cookies and milk while my husband made a call. I could hear him in the other room, his voice shaking with anger. I tried to distract Isadora by asking about her day at school, but she kept looking toward the living room with worried eyes. After his call, my husband came into the kitchen. His face was red, but he was trying to stay calm for Isadora. He sat down next to her and gently explained that what other mommy told her wasn't true. He promised he loved me very much and would never hurt me. Isadora seemed confused, looking back and forth between us. "But she showed me pictures on her phone," Isadora said, her bottom lip trembling. My stomach dropped. Pictures? What pictures could she possibly have? My husband looked just as confused as I felt. We decided to call the school the next morning. Turns out my mother-in-law had shown up during recess claiming to be picking Isadora up for a doctor's appointment. The school called the emergency contact list and couldn't reach us. We later found out she had somehow given them wrong numbers for us. Luckily, the principal remembered our strict instructions about who could pick up Isadora and refused to release her. So instead, my mother-in-law had a chat with Isadora through the playground fence. That's when she showed her some photos on her phone and filled her head with lies. The school security eventually noticed and asked her to leave, but the damage was done. I was furious. We immediately updated the school's security protocols and provided them with photos of my mother-in-law, explicitly stating she was not allowed near our daughter under any circumstances. That night, after Isadora went to bed, my husband showed me what he found. He'd gone through old family photos and discovered what my mother-in-law had likely shown Isadora. It was a picture from his cousin's wedding 3 years ago. In the photo, he was giving his cousin's bride a congratulatory kiss on the cheek. From certain angles, it could look inappropriate if you didn't know the context. My mother-in-law had cropped it to make it look worse than it was. The next few weeks became increasingly tense. We started receiving calls from unknown numbers that would hang up when answered. Then packages began arriving. First a box of chocolates with a card saying, "Sorry for your broken heart," addressed to me. Then a teddy bear for Isadora with a note saying, "When Daddy leaves us, we still have each other." I disposed of everything before Isadora could see them. My husband installed security cameras around our house. We were constantly on edge, jumping at every noise. One afternoon, while picking up Isadora from school, I spotted my mother-in-law's car in the parking lot. I quickly grabbed Isadora and hurried to our car, constantly looking over my shoulder. As we drove home, I noticed she was following us. I took random turns, even driving through a fast food restaurant to confirm my suspicions. When she continued following, I called my husband in panic and drove straight to his workplace instead. He was waiting outside when we arrived, and we watched as my mother-in-law drove slowly past without stopping. That evening, we sat down with Isadora and tried to explain in simple terms that other mommy wasn't telling the truth, and that she shouldn't be talking to her. Isadora seemed confused and upset, asking why her grandmother would lie to her. It broke my heart that our 4-year-old had to deal with this kind of manipulation. The following Monday, Isadora's teacher called to inform me that my mother-in-law had sent cupcakes to the class with a note claiming they were from us. Thankfully, the teacher remembered our warnings and called before giving them to the children. I asked her to throw them away immediately, not wanting to think about what might have been in those cupcakes. We decided it was time for more serious action and filed for a restraining order. While waiting for our court date, things escalated further. My sister called to tell me my mother-in-law was spreading rumors in the family that my husband was abusive, and that's why she was trying to rescue Isadora and me. Some relatives actually believed her, and my Facebook messages filled with concerned inquiries. I posted a detailed explanation of what was happening, including screenshots of the notes and pictures of the unwanted gifts. Most family members supported us once they knew the truth, though a few still sided with my mother-in-law. The night before our court date, we heard glass breaking downstairs. My husband grabbed the baseball bat we keep by the bed and told me to call 911 while he checked it out. I locked myself and Isadora in the bathroom until the police arrived. They found our living room window smashed and a brick on the floor with a note tied to it. "He'll hurt you both eventually. I'm just trying to save you." The officers took the brick as evidence and filed a report. The next morning, we went to court for the restraining order hearing. I was a nervous wreck, constantly checking over my shoulder. My husband held my hand tight as we walked into the courthouse. Isadora was staying with my sister Anna, who had been horrified when she learned the full story about what happened at the birthday party. The judge granted the temporary restraining order immediately. My mother-in-law couldn't come within 500 feet of us or our home and was prohibited from contacting Isadora's school. I felt a small weight lift off my shoulders, but knew this was just the beginning. When we got home, there was a business card stuck in our door from a social worker named Rachel. She'd left a note asking us to call her regarding a welfare check for Isadora. My stomach dropped. I immediately called and spent almost an hour explaining everything. She was understanding but said she still needed to come by for an official visit, which we scheduled for the next day. I barely slept that night, worrying about all the ways my mother-in-law might try to make us look bad. Rachel arrived promptly at 10 a.m., professional but warm. She spoke with Isadora alone for about 15 minutes while I nervously cleaned our already spotless kitchen. Afterward, Rachel assured me she had no concerns about Isadora's welfare and would file a report stating there was no evidence of any abuse or neglect. She mentioned that false reports were taken very seriously and could result in consequences for the reporter. Just when I thought things might calm down, I received a text from an unknown number. A photo of me and Isadora at the park from the previous day, with the message, "I'm always watching. I'll save her from him." We reported this to the police, though the officer who responded didn't seem particularly concerned and merely suggested we block the number and continue documenting everything. The next day, Isadora's school called. The receptionist, Sharon, explained that a woman claiming to be Isadora's aunt had tried to pick her up. When they refused, she caused a scene in the front office, yelling that we were abusive parents. Security had to escort her out. I rushed to the school where the principal, Mr. Nathan, showed me security footage of my mother-in-law screaming at the staff. The school filed a police report for trespassing. That night, we discussed potentially moving to a different town or state. The thought of uprooting our lives because of my husband's mother made me angry, but I was beginning to think it might be our only option. The following morning, we discovered our car had been vandalized with the word "liar" keyed into the driver's side door and one tire slashed. The responding officer was more sympathetic this time, taking photos and suggesting additional security cameras for our driveway. Later that day, my sister Anna called in tears. My mother-in-law had shown up at her workplace and caused a scene, accusing her of enabling abuse by helping us. Anna's boss had to call security, and she was humiliated and frightened. I called other family members to warn them they might be targeted next. Most were supportive, though my cousin Bobby suggested we should just let my mother-in-law see Isadora to keep the peace. I hung up on him. The stress affected all of us. Isadora started having nightmares and wetting the bed, something she hadn't done since she was 2. My husband constantly checked the security cameras, while I found myself jumping at every noise and peeking through the blinds at any passing car. 2 days later, I was grocery shopping with Isadora when I spotted my mother-in-law staring at us from the end of an aisle. I abandoned our cart, grabbed Isadora, and rushed to the car. As we left, I could hear my mother-in-law calling Isadora's name. I drove straight to the police station where Officer Lisa took my statement and said they would look for my mother-in-law at the store. When we got home, I found flowers on our doorstep with a card reading, "I forgive you for lying about me. Let's start fresh for Isadora's sake." I threw them away and double-checked all our locks. My husband came home early after I called about the grocery store incident, looking exhausted. He'd been researching security systems and scheduled an installation for the following day. The next morning, I met my friend Corey at a coffee shop, needing to talk to someone outside the situation. As I was explaining everything, a woman at the next table kept watching us. When she left, she deliberately bumped our table, spilling my coffee, and whispered, "He has everyone fooled, doesn't he?" before walking out. I was so shaken I had to leave immediately. When I got home, there was an unmarked package on our porch. My husband came home to open it safely and found a doll resembling Isadora with a red ribbon tied around its neck and a note saying, "Don't let him hurt her like he hurt the others." We called the police again, who took the items as evidence. That evening, my husband received a call from his boss, Jason. Someone had been repeatedly calling his company, asking to speak to HR about my husband's history of violence. Jason warned that if the calls continued, it could become a problem for the company. The next day at Isadora's pediatrician appointment, a stranger sat next to us in the waiting room and began questioning Isadora about whether she was happy at home or if anyone hurt her. I immediately moved seats and alerted the nurse, who ensured no one unauthorized would access Isadora. When we got home, there was a message from Isadora's school requesting a meeting. The next morning, Principal Nathan explained that a woman claiming to be a court-appointed advocate for Isadora had come demanding access to her records. She had presented fake documents that initially looked official. Security footage revealed it wasn't my mother-in-law this time, but the daughter of one of her friends. She was now recruiting others to help her campaign against us. That afternoon, my sister called about a fake social media profile using her name that was sending friend requests to family members and posting horrible accusations about my husband. My husband contacted his IT specialist friend Benjamin to see if the profile could be traced. Later that day, I spotted an unfamiliar man photographing our house. I triggered our security system's panic button, which automatically called police. Though the man fled before police arrived, they advised us to post no trespassing signs to strengthen any future trespassing claims. That night, as we were reviewing evidence for our permanent restraining order hearing, all the power in our house suddenly went out. My husband discovered someone had deliberately cut our power line. The police suggested we stay elsewhere until the hearing, so we checked into a hotel under my maiden name, telling Isadora it was a special vacation. From the hotel, I received a call from someone claiming to be Abigail, a newspaper reporter working on a story about family court issues, who had heard about our case. After I declined to comment, she texted that my mother-in-law has quite a story to tell, and asked if I wanted to share my side. My husband called the newspaper and discovered they had no employee named Abigail, just another of my mother-in-law's deceptions. On the day of our permanent restraining order hearing, we dropped Isadora with my trusted friend Sean. As we drove to the courthouse, we noticed my mother-in-law following us and called police, who met us at the entrance. In court, we presented all our evidence while my mother-in-law represented herself, making false claims about my husband's non-existent history of violence. The judge granted the permanent restraining order, extending it to 1,000 feet, and adding specific prohibitions against contacting Isadora's school or our workplaces. As we left, my mother-in-law was standing by her car in the parking lot, staring at us with hatred until a police officer reminded her about the restraining order. That night, as we celebrated our small victory, my husband's sister Sydney called in tears. My mother-in-law had shown up at her apartment ranting about how we'd turned the courts against her and demanding Sydney's help to save Isadora. When Sydney refused, my mother-in-law destroyed her living room before leaving. Sydney had to lock herself in the bathroom and call police. The next morning, I woke to numerous missed calls and messages from family members. My mother-in-law had created a Facebook group called Justice for Isadora, where she posted altered photos of Isadora with fake bruises, fabricated text conversations, and false claims about my husband being violent. Though most relatives recognized the lies, some were asking questions. My husband immediately contacted our lawyer about this defamation. Meanwhile, Corey texted that he'd seen my mother-in-law at the grocery store showing strangers photos of Isadora and crying about her abusive son. When he confronted her, she hurried away, but not before receiving sympathetic looks from several people. That afternoon, Isadora's school called about another incident. This time, my mother-in-law's friend Donna was outside the playground trying to talk to children through the fence, showing them pictures and asking if they'd seen any bad things happen to Isadora. Police arrested Donna for trespassing. As they took her away, she shouted, "The truth will come out. You can't hide forever." My husband's workplace situation worsened when someone sent company-wide emails linking to the Justice for Isadora Facebook group. Though HR knew the accusations were false, they asked my husband to take paid leave until things settled down. The next morning, Officer Lisa came to our door with news. My mother-in-law had been arrested for violating the restraining order after being caught repeatedly driving past our house. At her bail hearing, my mother-in-law appeared disheveled and angry, screaming that we were liars keeping her from saving her granddaughter. The judge denied bail based on her courtroom behavior, the evidence we'd presented, and her previous violations. The following week was peaceful, but it didn't last. I received a call from Donna, who had been released on bail and wanted to talk sense into me. That afternoon at an ice cream shop with Isadora, I confronted a man openly photographing us. Later, our security cameras showed the same man had driven past our house earlier. My husband's company received a letter from my mother-in-law's lawyer, threatening to sue them for enabling abuse by employing him. Though the company lawyers were ultimately supportive after hearing our full story, we received a panicked call from Sean during the meeting. Donna had shown up at his house claiming to be Isadora's aunt sent to pick her up. Sean had refused and called police immediately. After consulting with family lawyer Abigail, we filed for sole custody of Isadora with specific provisions barring my mother-in-law from any contact. Days later, Officer Lisa called with disturbing news. Police had searched my mother-in-law's house and found detailed plans for rescuing Isadora, including maps of her school, our daily routines, and a list of places she planned to take her. This evidence led to additional charges and a stronger case for the prosecutor. At my mother-in-law's trial, she appeared even more disheveled, with a vacant look in her eyes. When asked to plead, she launched into a rambling speech about saving Isadora from her monster son. The judge found her guilty on all counts and sentenced her to 3 years in prison with mandatory psychiatric evaluation and treatment. He also granted our permanent restraining order that would remain effective even after her release. In the months that followed, our lives gradually returned to normal. My husband returned to work, and Isadora started kindergarten and made new friends. My mother-in-law's helpers disappeared once she was imprisoned. Donna moved to another state after receiving probation, and the Facebook group was taken down. Most family members eventually accepted the truth. We received occasional updates about my mother-in-law's condition from the prison psychiatrist. She'd been diagnosed with delusional disorder and was finally getting treatment. A year later, we moved for my husband's new job opportunity. Not out of fear, but for a fresh start. We didn't provide my mother-in-law with our new address. Isadora is 7 now and thriving. She remembers little about that difficult time. Sometimes she asks about her other mommy, and we explain in age-appropriate terms that grandma is sick and can't see her. Perhaps when she's older, we'll share the full story. As for me and my husband, we're stronger than ever. Going through something like that either breaks you or bonds you for life. Thankfully, for us, it was the latter.